You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. This episode is brought to you by KingswaySoft. KingswaySoft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 70 countries and regions rely on KingswaySoft to integrate data with various business systems in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage their information assets. We thank KingswaySoft for sponsoring ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. So Matthew, when you have something you need to do, either work or personal, are you the kind of person who will just try and knock it out or focus on, or are you kind of, you do part of it, then you go do something else, and you come back to it later? How do you approach that?
Well, I mean, I guess there's no one size fits all for me on that. There's definitely those projects where I can kind of break it down, chunk it out into little pieces and parts that I'll do here and there. But sometimes I just kind of sit down and crank. I'm curious though, why do you bring it up?
Well, because I've been thinking about things, and this wasn't really a work thing. It was more, in the context of, say, reading a book. I've realized I don't have the patience to wait a month to read a book. I want to get it done. And, what I found is earlier in my life, I got really scattered, where I would have, a bunch of books I'd started, things for projects that I had started were kind of half done. And I just felt, just very unsatisfied with that, because it feels like I'm busy, but I'm not really doing anything. Sure. And, so my philosophy is focused intensity, which means if I'm doing something, if I'm reading a book, if I'm, working on a project coming up either for work, if I've got a big RFP I've got to respond to, I find it's much more satisfying to focus on that thing and only that thing and get that done, or at least get a good chunk of it done, rather than, I'm going to read a few pages and I'm going to watch TV, then I'm going to go do this other thing, Yeah. To me, that's much more satisfying to get things done, and over time, you'll feel like you're getting a lot more done than having a bunch of things in flight projects.
So I like that for a couple of reasons. One, I think the term of focused intensity is it's just kind of a cool name, but I do like the concept of Joel Lindstrom, focused intensity. It almost sounds like a seminar, a life purpose there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm always spinning a lot of plates, and that's the metaphor that I will typically use for a lot of the different things that I'm doing. And I like that metaphor quite a bit, because when you're spinning a lot of plates, it's okay if you've spun them the right way. You can walk away from a plate for a while you go and work on some of the other things, and you just have to make sure that you get back before those initial metaphorical plates start to wobble or start to fall. To me, that takes a couple of different things, right? One of them is setting expectations as to, do I start this plate spinning at all, or do I push it off until a little bit later? Was it spinning when it showed up for me? Is there kind of a deadline that was foisted upon me? It really hammers home the importance of kind of focusing on the right things when you have all those options in front of you. I mean, you talk about getting spread a little bit thin and wanting to focus in on things. If you do that, the potential drawback is you focus on the wrong things accidentally, and you're just stuck there because you're too focused.
Yeah, I'll relate it to things like managing email inbox or task lists too, because a lot of times towards the end of the day, you just want to turn off your email, but I know if I do that, it'll only be worse in the morning. So it's forcing myself to take another 15 minutes, go through the emails I have in the inbox, with pushing myself, delaying gratification. In some cases, maybe you're going to go out with friends or whatever, but pushing yourself to delay gratification for not all night or anything, but for a focused period of time to knock it out. And that will be much more satisfying than just leaving it and coming back to the mess later.
Sure. Assuming it is a mess, right?
Yeah, or you're working on a document for a customer or a deliverable of some kind, and you're halfway done with it. Push yourself to get to that next logical break point rather than stopping now. And because if you stop now, you'll be carrying pieces of it in your brain and not able to fully focus on the next item. That's what I'm not saying, work like a workaholic and never stop, but,
Sure.
Push yourself to get a little bit farther and have that focused time. And the end result is much more satisfying, and you'll feel like you get a lot more done.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. Devil's advocate, though, just when I think of a certain type of project where I control all the parts of it myself, I can knuckle down and just get that focus intensity or intensity of focus rather, and hammer through it. But if there is kind of a team that I'm depending on for some of those things, there may not be that option. So there'll have to be this kind of period of waiting for inputs or trying to coordinate with other people that's foisted out there. How does that figure into this intensity of focus?
Well, what you do is you intensely yell at the other team members and get them. No, you don't do that. what you would do is, I would, you're right. You can't control what the other people are doing, but what I can do is push myself to break down what the dependencies are that I don't have, and get them down on a task list or something. And that way, sometimes it's the end of the day, or you're getting to the end of your work time, and you just want to stop and have a break. But if you push yourself to take an extra 5-10 minutes, get that on paper or in your task list out of your mind. And yes, you're not able to do those things, but you're able to get them out of your mind and push yourself to invest a little bit more, which will pay dividends later.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, one other thing as you're going through that kind of comes to me is, this concept of, kind of the decision-making process in kind of what's important to work on, right then, or if you've got things to delegate or to make sure that other people are doing, how to make sure that the focus is on the right things, kind of like the phrase, if don't sweat the small stuff kind of thing. How do you decide what's the big stuff and what's the small stuff?
Well, I'm not a fan of the don't sweat the small stuff, because the small stuff, if you don't sweat it, will grow into big stuff. I get the sentiment that you shouldn't worry about unimportant stuff, but even stuff that is, did I take the garbage out today? If that's in my mind, I'm not going to be able to focus, and I'll be distracted. So, if you can't act on it, putting it somewhere where I know I won't forget it, which in my case is my task list. And at work, they've enabled Microsoft To Do finally, and I've been using Microsoft To Do, and I actually like it. Having it tightly integrated with the Outlook tasks is good, because that way, I can in Outlook drag an email to a task and have it become a task and have it show up there. But then even if I'm not focusing on small stuff, so I'm prioritizing working on the more important items. But even stuff that's really small, like some friend called me yesterday and I need to remember to call him back, and I don't want to do that right now, but if I don't put it on the list, I'll forget about it, but I put it on the list, and then I make sure I go back to it. So that's my approach. But even stupid stuff, like I was watching a TV show, and I had watched 4 seasons, and there's one season left, and I was halfway through that. And even that unfinished loose end was taking up a space in my brain. So I decided I'm going to not let myself do any other, read books, listen to music, whatever, until I finished that. So I downloaded it, and then it was on a plane. I knocked out the remaining episodes. And that wasn't necessarily productive time, but it was time that I would otherwise have been doing that. But I prioritized that so that I can get that done, get that out of mind, so I don't have to think about it anymore.
Sure. So I'm intrigued. What was the series?
That series, Matthew, was the great 1970s detective drama Canon, starring William Conrad.
All right.
It's amazing. And the fact his car is drivable after every episode is just amazing, because that car gets pushed off the road, gets blown up, it started on fire one episode. It's awesome.
So if I check it out, do I have to be in for all 5 seasons, or?
You probably don't. It's self-contained episodes. But if you want the full experience, I'd recommend it.
All right, duly noted. I'll add it to the list.
All right, so you got a new phone lately, right?
I did. It was a bit of an unexpected phone replacement. Pulled my phone was sitting out on the table. I went to grab it to take a picture of a board game that we were playing, a new game that we had out on the table, and the camera was smashed. And it literally it looked like somebody had taken like an awl or like something to like puncture exactly where the camera lens was. I have one of those dual lens cameras, so you can get the depth of field focus. And if you look at those, it kind of looks like the two eyes of a face. Well, I mean, this one had a black eye or an eye patch or something after that.
I think that probably the person you were playing with who was losing the game at that time did not want the game to be photographed. So yeah, that's who I would suspect.
Maybe. But needless to say, I mean, I take a lot of photos, family photos with my phone, and not having a camera is a non-starter. And the cost to fix just that camera with that was prohibitively expensive. So long story short, I ended up with a new kind of the next generation of the phone that I had. I just picked up a Moto G6.
Nice.
Little better camera, a little narrower, a little larger screen. Trade-off is the processor is a little bit lighter than what I had before, but you get better battery life with that. And a little less RAM, which I only used about, on average, 2.5 gig of RAM of my 4 available. So this one has 3, so I should be good. But yeah, the transition into it, I mean, I've been an Android guy for a long time. It was coming from a very similar phone, but the transition in was super easy. Kind of migrating between phones within an ecosystem like that. They've got a lot of the kinks worked out. You just kind of sign in with the same, credentials. In this case, it's my Google account, and it'll give the option: do you want to restore from an existing cloud backup, which I did, and it just brought over all of my different apps. It brought in, depending on the app, some of the login information, some of that I had to rekey in from the new device. But it really cut down my time of getting the phone set up.
Nice. Yeah. When I transitioned from my iPhone, same thing. It moved. It recognized the apps I had, and somehow it even got the account information for some of them too. So that was interesting. Yeah. No, and I'm really happy about that. I mean, I remember early phone transitions where every single app you had to go in and re-download. There was no easy button for that, which is very frustrating. But as I did this, I was kind of reminded of a productivity tip that I have from a couple of phone swaps back, and it has to do with any apps where you're using two-factor authentication and using that phone as your second factor of authentication. Make sure that you have in a place that you can easily get to that kind of your safety net if you don't have two-factor available, because if the phone really takes a dump, then you need to have some other way to get back into some of those core applications, or you're really in a world of hurt. One thing I've done, because I've got almost every account I have on two-factor authentication, and one thing to note on that is the at least the Android version of the Microsoft Authenticator app will now, I believe it will sync your authentication. I believe I saw that. Mm-hmm. But one thing is, when you sign up like Dropbox and WordPress, all these places when you set up two-factor authentication or an authentication app, it gives you some single-use codes. Yep. Amazon does the same thing. Mm-hmm. I download those and store those. But most of these accounts, because I've had to reinstall my Authenticator app and several times, and if you lose that, you're not locked out. You can still have them typically text you a code or something.
Yeah. And specifically, it's around productivity because, I mean, I did have to go through that kind of fail-safe way to get access back, and it was slow and it was painful to get it back. And I knew where I had the code saved, but in kind of a stupid move, I had to be able to log into one of my accounts to get to the file that I had the code stored in. And I had enough of those dominoes set up that I vowed to myself I will never let that happen again.
Yeah, so I'm about a month into my move to Android, and on the whole, it's positive. I've found several things that I really like about it, and it's nothing big. I think on the whole, there's a lot more similarities than differences. Mm-hmm. But there's a few things that I will still say that I think iOS does a little bit more smoothly. So would you like to hear my list?
I'd love to hear it.
All right. So on the plus side, I love the back button. Not having a back button on an iPhone was one thing I really missed from the Windows Phone days, where you want to go back a level. You basically have to go home and then go to wherever you were again in iOS. Where in Android, you got the permanent back button that you can always get back. Although I do find myself sometimes tripping over that because I'm used to still, as this is a reflex, like a dialog box pops up. And usually in iOS, you just click off of it and it goes away, where in Android, it expects you to hit the back button for it to go away in a lot of apps.
Yeah.
I like, at least my phone has the fingerprint reader on the back rather than the bottom, and I find that a much more natural thing to do because it's right where my index finger is. Mm-hmm. So I like that. I like the actual phone features, what I think we talked about, where it's smarter about recognizing when there's a passcode and a link or something. But on the other hand, sometimes because it goes to that little phone bauble thing, you know what I'm talking about, the little round thing?
Yep.
Sometimes I can't find it, and I'm searching. I go off the phone app and I'm searching for where to get back to the phone. So I find that's a little bit confusing. I like the fact that my apps are in alphabetical order, so that you can, and with different, like the Microsoft. I love the Microsoft launcher. Now the default Microsoft launcher is kind of ho-hum. You might install it and like say, oh, I don't like these kind of things because it puts some Microsoft links in it. But what it adds that I really like is some of the additional desktops you can do are, if you're a Windows user, like they've got one for basically the timeline, which is pretty much the same timeline you see on Windows 10 with your documents you've opened for the last so many days.
Yep. And
that's really useful. So that's some of the things that I found that I really like. Also, if you have notifications that are, you get over too many notifications, like I'm getting, different games or Delta notifying me when it's not flight stuff. It's easy from the notification to swipe over, hit the settings, and say, "Don't show me these specific notifications anymore." You don't have to navigate to the notification area in settings.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's the things that I find that I like. The things that I found are maybe a little bit rougher edges. Apps seem to die more frequently on Android than iOS. And I don't know if it's Android's fault or quality control or what, but it's not typically for me the Google apps. Those are typically pretty solid, but the Hertz rental car app, for example,
really
will you'll get this app is not responding. Would you like to close it? And that's I think it's just maybe, I don't know if it's quality control or whatever. And I think it's all, Android has kind of the burden of having so many different device manufacturers, kind of like Windows does.
Yeah, but you are using a flagship. You have the Pixel 2, right?
Right, yeah.
So you would expect.
I would expect. Now, it doesn't happen every day, but at least several times a week I will see an app crash. The other thing is, and this doesn't happen very, very frequently, but I had a weekend where I kept my phone turned off pretty much the whole weekend. If you keep your Android phone turned off for an extended period of time and turn it on, and you have notifications, look out, because it's going to give you every notification you've got, and the phone is basically useless while the parade of notifications is popping up.
Yep.
Have you had that experience?
Absolutely. Well, and actually, I mean, just as I was going through the swap to my new phone, I mean, when the camera got smashed, it didn't sideline the phone entirely. I mean, the phone still works, but I had it off for about 2 days. I'd been using the new one, but I realized there was a specific file I had downloaded to my old phone. I powered it back up to go get that file, email it to myself. And lo and behold, I had to wait through that very parade of notifications.
Right, yeah. And I think that's the other reason why if your phone is asleep during the night and you turn it on, you got to be a little bit prepared for it to be not quite as responsive right away. It gets good after a few seconds, but you turn on and you immediately want to dial somebody. Sometimes just a little bit of lag, and I think it's those notifications coming up.
Okay.
The other thing, and maybe this is just to get used to it, I can't get used to the round app bubbles. I have some, I like the OneNote one that lets me click on it and do a quick note. I think that's great, but it's always in the way. I can never figure out where do I put this on the screen that I'm not going to have to move it when I hit the send button on my email or when I want to hit the app button. I like the idea, but I just haven't gotten used to it, and most of those that come up I've wound up turning off just because, well, they may be useful when I need that thing. I haven't been able to figure out where to put them when I don't.
Yeah, and for the sake of those not familiar with Android, it's kind of like it's literally like Joel's saying, a little circle icon that will draw over the top of an application that you're in and give you some sort of capability to a different app. And I tend to agree with you, Joel. I struggle sometimes with where to put those, and generally I don't use them. There are maybe only 2 that I use with any amount of frequency, just because they can be a little bit of a hassle in that way. And there's no, at least in the apps I'm using, there's no awareness that there's another app drawing on top of it, or no way for an app to know that there's another app drawing on top of it then. So it's just, it leads to that poor user experience sometimes.
Right. And so as far as finding apps, I would call it pretty much a draw. I would say Android gets points for putting the apps in alphabetical order. Also, the widgets and the multiple desktops are awesome because I think you told me this little trick to put all the music app widgets on the same screen. So you want to start a Spotify song or a YouTube video or something, you can do that very quickly. What I have noticed, though, is when you need to search for an app or a file or something, Android is less forgiving of spelling errors than iOS is. So I'll give you an example. You use Microsoft To Do. The app name is TO-DO. If you type TODO on an iOS device, you'll get Microsoft To Do. If you type TODO, it won't return anything on Android. You have to type it TO-DO.
Huh.
And same thing with if you type Dacebook instead of Facebook or something like that, you're going to find it on iOS when you're not going to get a result on Android. I think I've been able to make up for that by being able to lay out my frequently used apps. One of the things that the Microsoft launcher has as well, one of their screens is recently used apps, which I find very useful. I find the file system on Android vastly superior because it doesn't matter where it is, I can get to it. Google Drive, OneDrive, things like that. So on the whole, that would be good. The text messaging, I think iMessage is a better experience, but I don't like it because it's taking what's a standard and making it proprietary. So I'm morally opposed to iMessage. So even on my iPad, which I still use, which is iOS, I have installed the Verizon Messages app on there, so I can use SMS from my iOS device. but do it in a standard way and do cool things like delay send text messages. I can schedule a text for 5 o'clock tomorrow morning if I want to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the text messages in particular, have you started playing with the just the out of the box messages app now allows you to open your text messages from a web browser?
No, I haven't. But since I'm a Verizon customer, I've been using Verizon Messages, and they have the same thing where you can open it from a browser. You can also run it on Windows. So if I'm on my Surface or my work laptop, and people text me, which is great because I then type these really long text responses, and they wonder how I'm doing that with my thumbs.
Yeah, it makes that response a heck of a lot easier. I've loved being able to do this because it's not tied to a specific piece of software. It's literally just a web app, and I don't have to be on Verizon for it. Sorry, no, nothing against Verizon. I just don't use Verizon.
Yeah, and but that underscores something that I still that I firmly believe and try and do is I don't want to be at the mercy of an ecosystem because everybody's had good releases, everybody's had bad releases, and I like the flexibility to change. So that's why even on my Android device, I'm intentionally choosing apps that work on Windows and iOS, not Google only, not Apple only. And that way, when you make a change, I was doing that before when I was on an iPhone, and all of my apps that I use, I can use on my Android device. So, it's been very, very seamless.
Beautiful. Well, I will say, in our last episode, you had asked me if I was using the Android Podcasts app yet, and at the time, I was kind of like, well, when my phone went boom and I got a new one, I decided, hey, I'm going to try that new Android Podcasts app and see if it can be a viable replacement for me. So here's a couple of things. So overall, I've really liked the experience of Android Podcasts. I'm trying to make it work. There are definitely some things that I like and I don't like about it. In the like category, I mean, it's super lightweight, clean interface, not slow to navigate through, easy to find content I'm subscribed to and new content without having to sift through ads. And it's also synchronized between multiple devices, kind of how far you've played to and what you're subscribed to, which my previous app did not do. So as I'm listening on one device and then move to another, I have that consistency as I go between them. In the things I don't like category, one of them is it doesn't have any way to put together a queue of what episodes I'm going to listen to in one order. So it will just literally play through, like the next episode of whatever podcast I'm listening to, and I can't say, after I'm done listening to CRM audio, have it pop open, an episode of The Adventure Zone. Like I just can't do that yet. And I have to imagine that's a feature that will be coming, but it's not here right now, and that's really frustrating.
That seems odd to me because I think, since Google Play Music, which I guess is turning into iTunes or into YouTube Music. Since that has podcasts, you could, I believe, build a queue of podcasts there. So it made me think that that's something they're going to come out with.
I really have to imagine they will, and I really hope that they just consolidate the experience of when you're doing podcasts. There's not like Google Play Music podcasts and Android podcasts or YouTube podcasts like. Just make it one thing and have good functionality in each of them, please, pretty please. Let's hope we don't see the fragmented chat and video chat debacle that we've had in the Android world for a while.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I would really like to have is it is surprisingly difficult to get a list of the things that I subscribe to, which episodes haven't I listened to yet? Like if I go into an individual podcast's feed, I can see, here are the ones that I haven't listened to from this. But there isn't that same thing.
Even if you subscribe to it, you can't say on played list episodes?
If I am subscribed to it and I click into that individual podcast, but there's no aggregate across the 25 subscriptions that I have.
Okay.
So I have to click through 25 different ones to see like, or it's more of a hassle than it should be. I should be able to say, almost like your email inbox, go to unread, or in this case, unlistened to. So that was surprising to me as I was using it. Hasn't been a showstopper because I usually stay on top of them. But if I fell behind it all, it would be frustrating to get back up to speed.
Especially if it was an episodic thing that you were listening to in order.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that reminds me of one thing. Pretty much is from a tool perspective, the best thing that I've used this week is my Surface, which I have enrolled in the Windows Insider program. Got the Redstone 5 build, which is soon to be released generally. But the best thing in there is the new clipboard. You got the ability, it basically remembers everything you copy. And then when you paste, you can do Windows key V and choose from items you copied, which is huge. Because if you're copying passwords or you're copying snippets of text, but then you copy something else and overwrites it. But here's the cool part. It syncs to the cloud and will sync to other devices, including your Android phone, using the Swift Key keyboard. And the Swift Key keyboard, which I'd used on iOS and it was kind of ho-hum, the Swift Key keyboard on Android is actually pretty good. Microsoft owns it. And it already has that kind of multi-item clipboard where you can pick from what you use. But that, to me, has been the technology thing that has rocked my world the most in the last 2 weeks, just because instantaneously it made me more productive by not having to continually go back and copy things, especially you're working with documents and you want to copy multiple sections and rearrange them and paste them in different orders, or I'm copying a snippet of text, but then I want to go and I was publishing our last episode of our Power Apps podcast, and I had I have the description in a Word document, and I copy it, and then I go to the site that hosts it, and then I have to log in there, and that overwrites my text. Well, now it didn't. I could just go in and copy the password and paste it in there, and then go paste the description. So something to look forward to. It's really something. So if you search for Windows Cloud Keyboard Sync, you'll see details about it.
Yeah, I'll check that out. I'm excited about the kind of clipboard history. I've used various add-on tools in the past to do that. There's a great one I used back in the day called Clipboard Recorder that did a really good job with that. The password thing is a little bit of a, there's some concern there because, storing that information potentially in plain text for, passwords and that kind of thing, maybe not the best practice. I have to imagine there's something more sitting behind that, or some intelligent way to purge some of that without having to do it manually.
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be certain things that will opt out of that. Maybe your password manager or something.
Yeah. So,
you can choose as well as the cloud sync. You can choose to say sync everything I copy, or say manually sync, and then when you hit Control V and you have something you want to sync to your phone, you can hit the sync button. The Swift Key keyboard sync isn't yet enabled, so if you have the preview and you install it, it won't do it. It will sync it between Windows devices. But it's going to once this is released to the public, it's going to sync with the Swift Key keyboard on both iOS and Android.
How well have you played with it a lot? Do you know how well it works with in an Excel document you've got a range of cells and you try to go paste it elsewhere? Does it have some of the intelligence when you're in a specific type of document like that, or does it kind of push it out to plain text?
I don't know about if you copied multiple cells, how that would work. I may give that a try, but I do know I copied text that had both text and pictures and hyperlinks in it. It kept that formatting.
Okay.
So it seems fairly intelligent. I think there's some limit, like it's limited to so many KB, so it doesn't balloon up when you copy 10 pages or something.
Yeah,
but
it makes total sense.
Realistically, it's a good thing.
Well, giddy up.
All right,
something to look forward to.
Yeah, something to look forward to. So use your focused intensity and set up your new phone, Matthew.
Sounds good, Joel. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks. Bye. This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. Follow Matthew on Twitter at @MCAnderson or on his blog, connectingthedata.com. Follow Joel Lindstrom on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. ProdCast and the rest of the CRM Audio Network are available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and anywhere else fine podcasts are available. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.